Hello, I'm Whitney. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about 22 to-be-read books that I want to do in 2022. I know it's a little bit late in the year, but I'm just getting started, so I figure you guys can forgive me this one time. I'm going to break this into both a sci-fi list and a fantasy list. So let's get started. First, my books that I want to read for fantasy includes The Goblin Emperor, which I've heard nothing but good things about, especially being a character-focused fantasy book about goblins that aren't very included in a lot of other books. So I'm pretty excited for this one. We'll see how much I like it a little bit later on this year. The next one is Sword of Kaigen. I've heard a lot of my favorite booktubers mention this book, and there's not a whole lot of fantasy standalones that have gotten this much hype. So I'm definitely very intrigued to hear a lot about what's going on with this one. Focused on a mother and her daughter, and focuses primarily on that relationship, and is supposed to be something more along the lines of Avatar: The Last Airbender with complex mother-daughter relationships. So we'll see how that one goes. The next one is The Last Unicorn. This one is definitely a backlist classic fantasy that I have heard is really awesome. It's pretty short, and it's something that I have been meaning to read for years and never have gotten around to it. So I'm very excited about that one. So next is Rage of Dragons. I know everyone's already read this book, but I haven't. So I can't wait to start this one and find out what all the hype is about. Next is the Book of Jerrig. Again, this is a much older fantasy book, but I've heard a lot about this book. Book of Jerrig actually encompasses the first 3 books in the novel series and is supposed to be very satirical, very tongue-in-cheek. I've heard a lot about Stephen Brust and his beautiful prose, so I can't wait to start that one. It's definitely going to be one that I finish this year. Grace of Kings, which is the first one in the, I think it's the Dandelion Dynasty series. The 4th and final book for this series comes out this year, so I figured now is the time to start the series and really get a chance to understand if I like Ken Liu as a writer or not. I've heard a lot of good things about this series. I've just never gotten around to it because it was never finished, so we're gonna find out how good this series is throughout this year. The next one is going to be The Words of Radiance. Brandon Sanderson on everybody's TBR already, especially with his recent news, but I have only read the very first book of his Stormlight Archives, so I need to continue with that series, especially because I feel like I have been left behind. Words of Radiance is the next book that I have yet to read. And for my final to-be-read book this year for fantasy, I want to read something by Guy Garvell Kay. I've heard nothing but good things. He's supposed to be a fantastic writer. He has a lot of standalone fiction, most of it being historical fantasy. So I want to read either something like Taigana, which I hear nothing but good things about, or maybe something like The Lions of Alrasid. I've heard both those books are maybe his best works, and they're both standalone, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and try one of those. Now let's get into my sci-fi list for 2022. And remember that I'm gonna be reading more than these. These are just the ones that I've been meaning to read for a long time, and I want you guys to hold me accountable for them. I wanna read House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds. This book has gotten quite a lot of hype, especially if you follow Media Death Cult. He loves this author. He has definitely convinced me that I need to read something by this author. The premise sounds awesome. This is supposed to be a standalone, so I don't have to commit to a huge series. Even the author himself has said this is his favorite novel that he's ever written to date, so I can't wait to get into this House of Suns. This will definitely be one of the books that I'm gonna have the first half of the year. Next is Shadow of the Torturer. Again, speaking of Death Media Cult, I know that cult is doing a reading of that entire series. It's a 4-book series by Gene Wolfe. It's supposed to be one of the most complex and the most dense science fiction and fantasy novels ever written. I'm not exactly sure why, and I don't really know anything about what it's about, but I do plan on trying to at least get through the first book and see what I think. I plan on doing a review on my channel, which may not be the most exciting ever because I am not a diehard fan, but maybe I'll become one. We'll find out. The next one is another standalone novel. It's called The Sparrow. This book has been recommended to me many, many times. It's supposed to be happening in space around a first contact, and yet The Sparrow is actually a book about religion and a book about humanity, as is many sci-fi books. It's supposed to really change the way that you look at religion and humanity as a whole, and I've heard really good things about this book. Can't wait to read it. I'm really high hopes for this one, so this one is definitely gonna be this year. Next is The Handmaid's Tale. Again, I know this is like super old and whatever, but I can't read every book ever. I really watched season 1 of The Handmaid's Tale when it came out on TV, and it really blew me away. The premise was spectacular. So I'm really curious to read the book, especially because I think it's on season 4 or 5 now, and yet it's like a really short book. There's a lot of discussion around The Handmaid's Tale, and some people are even required to read it now in high school. It must be very meaty and full of a lot of ideas. So I really like to read The Handmaid's Tale, the book, and then kind of continue with the series and see what I think about that. And that could be an upcoming episode for this channel later. The next book I want to read is actually in the middle of a series. It's Endymion by Dan Simmons. So I've read Hyperion in the fall of Hyperion last year. It was one of my top surprise favorite books last year. I didn't know how awesome this book was, but I need to continue with the series so that way I can tell you guys whether or not I would recommend the whole series or not. There's a lot of controversy around these last 2 books in the series, and I'm not exactly sure why, so I plan to find out. Dawn by Octavia Butler. Last year I read Kindred by her, and I've been really surprised. Her writing is so easy to get through. It's so poignant and so timely, even though it was written back in the 70s. So I can't wait to dive into more Octavia Butler, and I wanted to make sure that Dawn was on the top of my list this year. The next book I have actually already started reading. It's called A Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge. A Fire Upon the Deep is the first in a duology. The second book, I believe, was the one that was award-winning. I don't remember. Maybe it was this one. The important part is one of these 2 books was a Hugo Award winner and is supposed to be a really intriguing first contact book. They're supposed to have some really interesting aliens. I think I'm only on chapter 11 so far, but I can tell you very, very intriguing concepts already. It's a little bit of a thicker book, so I wanted to get a head start on it already. Next, I really would like to start the Culture series this year. I hear a lot of things about it. Ian Banks is supposed to be an amazing writer. A lot of people talk about the first book not being very good, and that maybe you should start with the second book instead. So I think the first book is called Consider Phlebas, but the second book is something here on the screen. It is a book that I was told is a lot more easy to get into, a lot higher impact of a writing. So I probably will give the first book a chance, and if I can't get through it by halfway, then I'll probably ditch it and go to the second book in the series. But this is a series that I want to at least have completed 1 novel in and be able to talk about. So definitely something I'm going to do this year. The next one is another second book. I read The 3-Body Problem. This book has been something that is a daunting series for me for a long time. I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to get into it, being that it's a Chinese science fiction, but The 3-Body Problem really surprised me, and so I really want to read the second book. A lot of people have said that the second book is really where the series gets good, so I can't wait to try this out and see if it's really that much better. I do plan on doing a 3-Body Problem video in the future, so definitely watch out for that. Next is going to be an oldie but a goodie, The Diamond Age by Neal Stephenson. He is one of those authors that you just gotta keep reading. I think The Diamond Age is also a Hugo Award winner. I read his previous book, Snow Crash, and he has a bunch of books, even still coming out with books even now. So I really want to read The Diamond Age. I've heard a lot of really good things about it. Some people even say that it's his best work. So again, I would like to be able to weigh in on that. Next is a book called Dogs of War. I think this book has been out for a little while. It's by Adrian Tchaikovsky, who's rapidly becoming one of my favorite sci-fi authors of all time. I loved his book, Children of Time, and I really wanted to give some of his other works a chance. So Dogs of War is a book that is a little bit shorter, and I'm really intrigued to try it. Next is Calculating God. This novel is a Robert Sawyer novel. He has come out with several books that I have constantly been interested in their premises and yet never gotten around to actually reading one of his novels. So I can't wait to start Calculating God just because I think it was the premise that intrigued me the most. I mean, who doesn't want to meet an alien species who's all of a sudden really interested in how and what our religious culture is? You know, we would think that it would have to do more with our technology or more about our resources, but this book is just such an interesting premise. I can't wait to start it. The last book on the list is going to be Shades of Grey by Mr. Ford. This book kind of got put on the back burner because it came out around the time of 50 Shades of Grey, and of course it's completely different topics. So this book is actually about a like sort of dystopian world happening in the future where all of humanity is underground and they are having a social system around how well you can see different shades of color. And this is kind of an intriguing process, especially when we live underground. Maybe they can't see very well and it's way different than what we are right now, but it's such an intriguing concept as far as a society based around sight. So I can't wait to get into that book. We'll see how these go this year. If you're interested, like, subscribe, comment down below, and I will keep these videos coming. See you later.